I'm Ithen Lewis. I'm professor of English at the University of Illinois at Springfield. I've been here for 21 years.
I'm Майк Мхеидзе, and I'm a lineman at CWLP. I moved here from Moscow, Russia, 21 years ago.
And so, Mike, as you just mentioned, you've been in Springfield for a couple decades, but explain to us a little bit about where you grew up and how you were raised.
When I was a kid, my parents moved to Moscow, and that's where I grew up. So all I remember is when I went to school, a university, I went to Army. So pretty much I lived in Moscow. That's where I'm from. And I felt that was a great place because all I hear from newspaper, radios, and TV is this is a great country. I hear something different about other countries in the world, like United States, for example. They're saying that the country is ruled by crooks and thugs, and there's a lot of problems, drug problems, gangsters, and there are only a few people that are rich, and most of them is poor. And there's a lot of homeless people, and they show homeless people on the streets. They show drug dealers. So pretty much the picture that was shown, it was only part of the truth, not a whole truth. So that was a lie. The lie we grew up in a society where a lie was normal. So pretty much it was in our blood to learn about rest of the world, and we knew we lived in the best country in the world. Pretty much we have great future, which is a communism, which is based on theory that everybody will work as what his destiny is, what they wanted to do. At the end of the day, there will be no money. They don't get paid. But at the end of the day, they will go to the store and pick what they want. They don't have to pay for anything. There'll be no money. So this was kind of like a dream. Everybody thought, oh, that'd be great. But the thing is, who is going to do a dirty work? That was unknown. So there was a lot of questions was unanswered. So this is the place we lived, and that's the place was very normal to us because that's what we see. We didn't see anything else. Pretty much, if you can picture yourself in a room, all you know is what is in the room. You don't know what's outside the world.
And then, so having grown up with these beliefs that the outside world was such a bad place and America was such an awful country, how did you end up living in America?
Well, Gorbachev, God bless him, opened the doors. Matter of fact, I heard this, and it caught my attention about what they said about Gorbachev's revolution. Is it's a you might believe it or not, but it's a VCR revolution. What happened is, to that point where VCR was invented and American movies were introduced to Russians, and they see the truth in the movies where people go to work, and they have houses, they have cars, and they live a happy life just like normal people, like they're supposed to. And this kind of undermined the whole idea of, are we going the right way or not? So, and from that point on, I remember when step by step, it just slowly but surely, all information just start trickling in, and it was like waterfall of information that was coming from West and the United States. In Russia, I remember when people are getting their newspapers in the morning. So, and from this point, they thought, this is fresh air. This is a real life. I personally, myself, read the papers a lot. On the way to work, it was about an hour and a half ride. I had to take a bus and the subway, so I was reading. And when I get to work, we're discussing what we're at. And the people I was with is just people with a higher degree, with university's diplomas. They're not stupid, so they were discussing all this. They knew there was something else behind what we see. There's a world. So, and slowly but surely, we were trying to see what's out there. And the more information we were getting, we knew this was a real life, and we lived in a shell. We lived in something else.
Did it feel like you'd been lied to your whole life, and then you're surrounded by all these other people who have been in this kind of alternate reality?
Absolutely. It was a matter of fact, there was a chaos because information was coming from all kinds of sources. And it's kind of, I can relate to this to Russian Revolution in 1917 when people thought, this is it, this is a hope, this is what we going to be like, this is our future, this is a new free man, this is what we're going to be. But the thing is, it's fall back in dictatorship, it fall back to somebody as always has to have a strong grip on Russia.
So you've become an ally to a Russian poet whose poetry has become problematic to the Russian government. Explain how you found out about him.
Of course, I couldn't get any straight answer from the newspapers or anywhere what's going on in Ukraine. So I started searching on the Facebook. Matter of fact, that Facebook is straightforward, and there's all kinds of information. It's up to you what to accept, what not accept, because you can dig up and find the true information because there's a lot of links going to different posts, different information. So it's up to you what to filter out and what makes you think. This is very, very interesting. And what I found out about Alexandre is on my classmate's post that she posted that a Russian poet might face a prison time for his poems. So, and I found him on the Facebook. I read his poems, and what he does is he's very disturbing. As far as he's not a tutti-frutti poet, he is writing about issue. He hits right in the bullseye of the issue. So he brings it up. He's looking in the corners and around the corners, and he cleans it very, very good. I mean, as far as bringing an issue to a surface, that's what really was interesting about him. Is first of all, he's not trying to blend in. He stands out. He burns the bridges. He's not asking for any excuses or anything. That's who he is. Like it or not, that's his color. He's not changing it. That's him. Matter of fact, there's many Ukrainian followers on the Facebook told him to move to Ukraine, to stay away from Russia, to where he might go to prison. No, he stays where he's at. That's him.
Ethan, as you mentioned, you're an English professor at UIS. How did you get involved in this story?
Well, Michael called me, and there's an organization in town, Poets and Writers, and Michael had gotten in touch with them, and I'm part of them. We spoke on the phone, and I guess what I was really impressed about was the story of Michael taking on Mr. Byevshev's cause. I was also really impressed by the poetry, which, I did some more work over, but the translations of it by Michael and by a man named Philip Weber are very, very fine. And so I touched it up a little bit. But what really struck me, is that, in the States, in the West, generally, poetry proves instrumental, I think. This is the way I teach it. In the words of Wallace Stevens, in lending people words with which to live their lives. That's a quote from Wallace Stevens, and I've always loved that. That is to say, aiding them to come to terms with their experience. And what a wonderful expression, right? Coming to terms with, because we need language, okay, in order to help us understand the world around us. So we literally do come to terms with experience. But what happens in Central America and in the Eastern Bloc and in many other places, it's not just a question of coming to terms with experience. Poetry can actually change living conditions, okay? Because poets are treated with more fear and respect. Poets' words. You heard Michael talk about how the newspaper changed his view, how American papers changed his view. You know, in Russia, and another reason why his view was so strong before he read those papers, because he was reading Pravda. You take literature and language very seriously. And so what you read, okay, is what you believe. And if someone like Mr. Bывшев, okay, is going to write in a voice that is protesting, that's something that the authorities will really take umbrage at, okay? If the artist is seriously read by enough, or read by a few to pose a serious threat, okay, that artist is endangered. And so that's what got me involved with Michael, and I'm just really quite impressed by both of these men, Bывшев and Michael's courage. You're not just going to have people not spoken for. You're going to try to raise a voice for them.
And so have you been working collaboratively to translate this?
Yes.
What's that process been like?
Well, it's been a lot of fun. There have been three of us. A gentleman named Philip Weber, who I've only spoken to via email, but Michael and I have met frequently. And the way it's tended to work is that Michael, who and Philip have brought out the poems in a fairly literal translated version, and have given them to me, and I've worked with them to try to form it more into poetry that is that we recognize as English poetry. There is a great language theorist. His name is Walter Benjamin, and what Benjamin talks about in his notion of the task of the translator in a classic essay, okay, is that a translation, in addition to resembling the meaning of the original, must lovingly and in detail incorporate the original's mode of signification, thus making both the original and the translation recognizable as fragments of a greater language. Okay, the basic error of the translator, Benjamin goes on to say, is that he preserves the state in which his own language happens to be, instead of allowing his language to be powerfully affected by the foreign tongue. So I was trying to get our language to be powerfully affected by the foreign tongue. Of course, I don't know Russian, but I was very, very moved by the way in which Michael and Philip, who know Russian and English, were moving toward getting out a feeling, okay, that was more universal, that could be caught in English and Russian. So I just did basically touch-ups on it.
And so the poet, Alexandre Bывшеве, is he aware that this is going on, and what's his reaction been, if so?
He is aware, and Michael, you've spoken with him on the Skype.
Yes. What happened is he's been isolated from, from his friends, from anything and everything.
He's been under house arrest, and he's there with his elderly parents, right?
Yes. They support him. Matter of fact, his mother is Ukrainian. That's how he knows Ukrainian language. But the problem is, anybody he meets on the street, it's a small town, 8,000 people. So nobody welcomes him anymore because everybody think he is a public enemy. So everybody's afraid of talking to him. Few people got in trouble just talking to him. So he's been isolated. That our job, what we're doing, is helping him a lot.
As Americans, we've heard lots about the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine over control of the Crimean Peninsula has been the latest in the news. Is there anything about this you think is particularly important for us to know that maybe hasn't been covered by the media as much?
Well, yes. First of all, war in Ukraine is not declared, and Russians completely ignoring and covering this, that they have no whatsoever any influence on this conflict, which is not true, because all ammunition and tanks came from Russia, and people that are Russian soldiers, enlisted soldiers, been offered to go, so they're voluntarily go for big rewards to go to Ukraine and fight. And under some kind of contract, unwritten contract could be, that if they die, their families will get some kind of reward too. So, and they're talking about young kids that are in their 20s, maybe, that are think of this war as the right thing to do, as a patriotic act, which have no clue what's going on, because it's not defending their country, but what they've been told is defending Russians in Ukraine that are gotten in trouble, and you guys need to support them, you need to help them. That's what's going on. But they're going there with no uniforms, no IDs, nothing. Nobody knows who they are. And they fight, and some of them die, and they brought back home unknown, and then they've been not introduced to anybody or anything. It's been all covered up. Like I said again, this information comes from Facebook and Facebook links, because nobody's really covering this story. So don't quote me on this. Go on the Facebook, dig it out, and look yourself and see what's going on.
And so what do you hope the future holds for the poet Alexandre BÜVŠEVE, who you've been working to translate? What's the ultimate hope for him?
Well, right now they doubled the sentence last summer from 2 to 4 years. So he's facing 4 years right now for his poems. Now, the local judge said that he's guilty. Now, his lawyer is holding appellant papers, or filed appellant papers to next big city, which is Orlov, and then they go farther and farther to try to defend BÜVŠEVE. And matter of fact, a year ago, on November 21st, Putin said in a Writers Association meeting that nobody in Russia will go to prison for their thoughts or poems or stories. Now we see again a year later is perfect case of the opposite, what he just said a year ago. I hope I get more media, more attention to keep BÜVŠEVE out of prison.